I want to say, I want to say hello and I want welcome everyone to the second in our OP online podcast discussions of topics related to the outdoors. This presentation, Modern Recreational Trail Design, a facilitated discussion, exploration of trail design, construction, use, and value. First of all, I'm Brian, and I help to facilitate the outdoor pursuits program through campus recreation at MSU Denver. And I'll be hosting today. The first thing I'd like to do is invite anyone who would like to introduce themselves from our audience. And then when we're through with that, it'll come back to me and I'll introduce David Barnett.
Well, I'm Diane. I'm the Director of Campus Recreation. I'll turn on my camera shortly here.
I am David Lamont, Assistant Director of Sports with Campus Rec.
I'm Elizabeth Krell. I'm student staff at OP.
I'm David Kramer, lecturer in computer science, and I've climbed all the 14ers.
Yeah, and we're looking forward to talking more with David about that and how to get started in 14ers discussion in a few weeks. All right.
Good.
All right, so thanks everyone. I'll introduce David Barnett now. And Barney is a certified professional geologist, geospatial analyst, photographer, and FAA licensed remote pilot. Barney has over 30 years of experience in recreational trail design, geoscience, geomatics, and geographic information science. Barney volunteers with the Colorado Plateau Mountain Bike Trail Association and volunteers for Outdoor Colorado. Barney is presently employed by a professional trail design and construction company with over 50 employees who are working on projects across the country. So with that, Barney, I'll toss it your way. We always defer to our presenter on the style and what have you, but Barney encourages questions. A slightly managed version of chaos, as I recall, was the description. So if you have questions, please jump in.
Yeah, shout them out. Thank you, Brian. Good introduction. Have a slide up here right now that kind of just expands upon that a little bit and speaks a little bit more about what I do specifically. I'm a designer of natural surface recreational trails, hiking, biking, equestrian, even adaptive trails as well. And I work for this company, Single Track Trails, the photo in the lower right. This is a crew of there was probably 5 or 6 people on the ground that day. And I took my drone out and did some aerial photography while they were out working. But there was 2 mini excavators and a dozer, trail dozer out in front. There's a guy with a chainsaw is out of the view out in front of the dozer, cutting brush and getting covered with ticks. So this is in South Canyon, just outside of Glenwood Springs. And that's me on a VOC trail project out of Gateway, Colorado. The VOC, or I am a VOC crew leader. I have the little tag on my VOC hat. So, I guess just to get started here is, it's like, what are we doing here? What are we talking about? I'm talking about a GIS and using GIS to design trails primarily. And I use GIS for mapping and design, inventory mapping, maintenance planning, and that kind of thing. And my field equipment is pretty basic. I have a chronometer, which is it just checks grade really in percent, not degrees. I carry a handheld GPS because I prefer them. There's better GPS channels on a handheld GPS than on a phone. And I have a drone, which I use quite often actually, and I'll show you some more pictures of that later on here. And then my software, I use ArcGIS. I use kind of whatever I need to use. All applications have different capabilities, and some applications are better at certain things than others. I use QGIS a lot. It's open source, free GIS software, and it has great cartography. ArcGIS has great cartography as well, but ArcGIS is a little bit more expensive than free. And Global Mapper is actually my primary tool. But I use Adobe products for creating maps and visuals and that kind of thing, more of the graphics, illustration kind of applications there. And then primarily I use GIS for terrain modeling, not trains, not model trains, but terrain modeling. So I'm creating tight topo on projects up to or down to 1 foot contours, so that I could see the project site really well. And we'll get into that a little bit more here in a minute, but I'm checking slopes for trail grade primarily. That's the main concern with designing trails, is ensuring that the trail grade is not too steep. Where's my mouse? So why trails? That's kind of where I ask the audience, why do you use trails? So I ask people to shout out. It's like, why are you using trails? Anybody?
For fitness, trail running.
Great. And for the communities, trails are used for connectivity and open space access, active transportation, getting to school or work on your bike or even on your feet. And then a lot of communities are using trails now as a economic driver through tourism. And the prime example of that is Moab, Utah, which designed and built hundreds of miles of trails, and subsequently there's now thousands and thousands of people, hundreds of thousands of people, probably millions of people visiting there every year. I'm not even sure if they count them all, or how would they count them all. But as Brian pointed out, why do we use trails as individuals? For health and happiness primarily, enjoyment, getting outside. Yep. I just want to point out there's a book that was created by the BLM and the International Mountain Bike Association that created or crafted guidelines for a quality trail experience. Oh, we have a question. Looks like it's for Brian. So why GIS versus just breaking out your 24,000 scale topographic map and drawing lines on? Because there's a little bit more power to GIS. Geographic Information Science, or systems, is what the acronym stands for. Through GIS, we can look at the aerial imagery, the terrain, the geology and hydrology, and the cross slopes, and anything else that's mappable sensitive areas, wildlife corridors. Nowadays, there's GIS data for every building envelope out there. So every house, building, outbuilding, whatever it is, and road, roads and existing trails are all mapped. This is QGIS, which looks a lot like ArcGIS in many ways. Oh, look at that. GSI. I use GIS for, or GSI for site selection. So a lot of it is about selecting the sites, the areas to put trails. In this case, it's a community being developed on Crowfoot Valley Road, just east of Castle Rock. And it's a large community. They hired the developer hired us to design trails to connect through the neighborhood to provide that recreational amenities so people could get out and primarily trail run and mountain bike was their target. And that was going to be a selling point for their homes. I think they're probably starting construction of homes there now. But I designed these trails 2 years ago. But I used GIS initially to look at the property to frame the potential for the trails and trail corridors before I even go to the property. On this property, there was some historical features that don't really show up very well. There's some older farming infrastructure on this site in this valley here, and they're going to have this wider double line trail as a concrete trail that'll wander through the property. I think initially they said it was going to be a large 10 to 12 foot wide gravel trail for equestrians, but I think they modified that to include a concrete with a parallel for equestrians that connects to a regional park off to the northeast. Otherwise, there's some other interesting features on this site that are more modern historical sites. There's a windmill that's actually operating on the site out here, and there's just some pretty cool canyons and stuff, and outcrops, things like that that are through this community. They also are going to put in a pool and some kind of rec center. They actually talked about putting a bike shop in their rec center, so residents could come and have their bikes worked on at this bike shop at the rec
Barney,
center. So yeah.
this location is north and east of where I live here in Castle Rock. And, I think that Castle Rock acknowledges that trails are the #1 recreational amenity. And I think that's true across many, many communities. Most of them who have trail systems, they tend to be the #1 amenity. So accessible and low cost to participate in all those good things. Do you know is this a gated community? Are these trails to be private, or will they be part of the trail system in Douglas County or City of Castle Rock?
I think that was a stipulation of the project initially, was that the City of Castle Rock required that they remain open.
Excellent.
And to the public. Even if this becomes a gated community, I believe that they would have to, provide access. I'm not sure how you would control it either.
Right.
Realistically, there's a big utility corridor along the western edge of this property, and big power lines and natural gas pipes and that kind of thing. And there's a dirt road that follows this corridor that users use. recreationists, walkers, dog walkers, trail runners.
Mhm. And not to geek out too far, but do you see ponderosa pines in that area?
Yes, yep,
Okay.
that's a good question. It's ponderosa pine cover, and a lot of scrub oak, thick, dense scrub oak, the kind that made me walk around or crawl around on my hands and knees to get to the other side of the bush, which is a common theme with trail designers, is crawling around on the ground to get to where you need to go.
I gotta ask how many ticks you've had to remove.
Hundreds,
I bet.
yeah.
Any rattlesnakes to move?
There and across the west. So I have talked to a few of our trail builders, the guys, even that are sitting on a machine, operating a machine, and they end up with 20 ticks on their body at the end of the day. And they're not crawling through the brush. So, yeah. The price to pay for the trail designer and the trail builder, but, it's still fun to get out. So yeah, moving more towards the terrain analysis. I'm using GIS to analyze trail grid, and that's very important. There's a little cartoon image here in the lower right that kind of explains that you need to keep the average grade of a trail under a certain percent, depending on the user or the intention. Those grades can go higher if it's a downhill flow, specific mountain bike trail. But for the average user, the trail grade needs to stay under 8%. Otherwise, it's just too steep. But as David Kramer mentioned, he's climbed all the 14ers in the state of Colorado. Most of those trails, and I've been on a lot of those trails, they're running better, closer to 100%, maybe 200% grade. And the grade scale goes from 0 to 400% if you actually look at the grade. And 400% isn't even vertical. Vertical, I think, is 1,000%. But typically, the grade percent scale stops at about 400%.
Yeah, and a steep highway is like our steepest highways are at 9%, isn't something like that?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And some of them up to 12%, which is very steep. But it's not really a grade that creates or provides for a durable trail. So one thing that we're always looking at is water and where water is going. If you think about a rainstorm, where's the water going to go? What's it going to do when it crosses the trail? So also in this example in the cartoon here is grade reversals in the trail. So you have to plan for grade reversals so that if the water does get onto the trail and flows down the trail, that there is actually this grade reversal or negative grade, so that the water is forced off of the trail. In that effect, you have to plan for that. So you have negative grade every 50 feet. So the overall total grade needs to be even lower to account for that. But there easily could be certain sections of a trail that are up to 15% to accommodate for obstacles, tree roots, rocks, outcrops that are hard to move or build the trail through.
For a number of years, I was a stormwater management foreman on a construction project. And so that's all about, keeping sediment out of the waterways, waterways of the U.S. if you want to get really technical. Is that a consideration when you guys are doing trail building and design? Is not only what is it moving water going to do to the trail, but where is that water going to end up?
Right.
And I would assume that's all part of the metric, right? And
Exactly.
I would also have to assume that that's probably a requirement too, some type of federal requirement for trail design, is you got to keep sediment and flow out of waterways.
That is correct. Yes, and I create stormwater management plans for stormwater permits. And that is another consideration. That's, the water as it migrates across the hillside acts as a sheet, actually, like sheet flow. And so when it does get to something like a trail or a road, it needs to continue on and not be channeled. In case of building a trail to last 100 years, definitely. So our guys, when they build trail, our crews, they cut trail and stabilize trail moving forward as a crew. So as soon as they get done, building a trail during the day, it is completed. Unlike road builders that often cut a hillside only to complete it months later, it's better in the long haul to stabilize those soils straight away, just so that we don't have to employ the mitigation necessary. And yeah, that's a great topic.
Yeah. You hit it right on the head there. In the construction world, it's we'll clear this grade and we'll stabilize that, at the end of the project, and then we'll spend all this money to mitigate all these problems for years until we stabilize it. And all the local municipalities are like, just stabilize it now and you're done.
Yeah. And I have to tell you, I recently wrapped up a stormwater permit in the state of North Carolina, and it was very difficult to get the state of North Carolina engineers to understand that we were stabilizing every day. They're not used to that at all. That they're into the litigating long term on soil erosion problems created by infrastructure development.
Hey, Barney, I have to head out, but I do have a question for you. So earlier you said, what do you use trails for? I have yet to start hiking in Colorado. I've been here for 3 years, and going uphill is not my favorite, but I do like snowboarding. So I don't know if do you like, how are ski resort sites selected? Is it the same concept? And do you know if there's any new ones coming up in Colorado?
I'm not really sure. I think there's maybe two new ski areas out there on the horizon. Permitting for ski areas is pretty difficult because of the amount of impact and area that they take up, I believe. And they're typically either on private lands. I think one of the new ski areas is entirely on private land. And Brian might know more than I do. I used to ski. I don't ski anymore. I don't have any cartilage left in my knees. I've been hiking and backpacking, and I was a telemark skier for 19 years. So yeah. And I rode a single speed bike.
What little I could tell in regarding that new ski area question is that yes, the permitting process is makes it nearly impossible, I think, nowadays. And for some of the reasons that Barney has already talked about, like hydrology and concerns around waterways and that kind of stuff, but also the ski areas that are already here don't want more ski areas. So barriers to entry exist that are really robust and strong, and with federal lobbying, et cetera, there as well. But there's a new kind of trend, and that is up skiing. Bluebird ski area. I'll put a link in here where you actually don't ride a lift. Doesn't sound like it would be Diane's favorite ski area. But you walk up, you literally you skin up and ski down, and it's in a controlled environment where avalanche control is avalanche risk is mitigated, and it's sort of a backcountry experience at a organized location. They're up there near Kremling on the way to Steamboat. Anyhow, yeah.
I would just speculate. I mean, this has to go into designing ski resort trails as well, right? I mean, they got to think about all these similar, what happens to water, what happens to grade. I think it would be very much the similar conversation.
Yes, avalanche mitigation. Yep. And then not necessarily new, but you'll probably see more of is lift specific served biking, or and not necessarily related to a ski area. We're just started working with a client in Texas, Palo Duro Canyon, is their plan, and it's private property. They're going to put in a ski lift for mountain biking specifically, but also for hikers to get to the other end of the spectrum or the area, so that they can hike in a completely different region of the
What town is
property.
that?
It's near Amarillo. Yeah, I guess I haven't been down there. Palo Duro is taunted as the second largest canyon in the United States, but I'm not sure if that's true or not.
Well, thank you very much. I look forward to seeing the recording.
I'm kind of moving forward into the terrain modeling. I just wanted to point out that I use LiDAR data as primarily for modeling the terrain and actually seeing the forest. I can see the forest a lot of times better with LiDAR data than I can in aerial imagery. It's not widely available everywhere, but it is available near residential developments and highway corridors, interstates, and that kind of thing. But the USGS is slowly attempting to cover the entire United States in LiDAR data. So they use airplanes or helicopters to scan the Earth, using light detection and ranging, so like a rangefinder, and it creates point clouds, three-dimensional point clouds. And I was actually joking with a colleague recently. Can you imagine using this data before computers? It would have been impossible. They had to plot all these points on Mylar and then stack them up on your light table. And it would have been nearly impossible. And your light table would have crushed, yeah, exactly. You'd have feet of Mylar or vellum stacked up. Technology has definitely helped terrain modeling out. As you could tell in the one picture of the power pole, there's two red dots on there. They can get the top of the elevation of that pole on the bottom as well. It's a great tool for mapping infrastructure, existing infrastructure, but it's even better for me for trail design. I can see the forest, see the trees for the forest. I'm not sure how that and then on this image here on the left is an example. I have similar examples in my work, but this is actually an image, a USGS image out of Washington State. In this example, I don't have the exact aerial image of parallel for this site, but I do know that it is covered in trees, absolutely covered in trees, this entire area. The LiDAR sees through the trees, and you can map the existing trails or roads. And these, what's this right here? It's a landslide. And then you can map the hydrology as well, where the streams are, and you can get a trail through there remotely, design it without actually going there. But you still have to go there at some point and verify. But you can do a lot of work in the office and minimize the number of days in the field crawling through the woods, trying to figure out the best place to put. But I do use aerial imagery as well. And this is kind of an overview image, but for connectivity mapping, I use some really tight aerial imagery as well to see the rocks in the forest, and we'll get on there a little bit more. I have a drone, so that was the next slide. I use a drone actually to map from the road instead of climbing up through the trees and the dense brush to verify the existence of outcrops. I pop the drone up. It's basically like my reverse periscope. I could see this outcrop. I could not see this huge outcrop from the road, which is right down here. I knew it was there from aerial imagery from USGS or Forest Service aerial imagery, but it wasn't super clear. So I can pop the drone up, take some photos. I can look at it live and just see if I even want to go up there. Otherwise, I can plan to just put the trail above this rock outcrop. So how to approach certain scenarios without actually going out there and blowing a bunch of time or spending a bunch of time crawling through the woods and the brush to get to a site. So it's kind of like some advanced planning right in front of being there. But otherwise, I use drones for aerial mapping. The image for this, I guess I'll just point to it. This is a planning application for planning aerial mosaics where the drone is taking a picture every 50 feet or whatever, 100 feet off the ground, and we end up collecting on this flight, I believe, was 6,079 images, which are all mosaic to create one image. And this is just west side of Montrose. I can also use, the drone to create point clouds. It's not LiDAR though. It's using a technique called photogrammetry, which is basically photos side by side to create 3D models for point clouds. It's worth a whole nother discussion of how that actually works. And it'd probably bore everyone to death. I do a lot of trail alignment verification using GIS. Clients present their project to land managers, the Forest Service, the BLM, who in turn, look at it in brief and tell them to hire me, basically, to verify their alignments. So that they're actually durable, sustainable trails. A lot of people, especially, and I don't mean to pick on landscape architects, but they oftentimes draw a trail on the map, and they're not really thinking about topography very much. They're thinking more about connectivity. In this case, the first line was a design line, and you could tell the difference between these two lines. The second line is actually a GPS walked line, and you can see that the person who collected this data went around a tree right there, the two trees. So you can tell that the GPS line is the guy walking, in the field collecting field data, versus the design line that was just sketched on a map.
Barney,
Yeah.
if I could jump in with a question, like, so you make me think of this question when you talk about someone had walked around a tree. To what extent do you make small adjustments in a trail in order to avoid cutting down vegetation?
That's a good question. That's a great question. So there's another step which I didn't really expound upon on this presentation. But when you after you design a trail, it has to go through the NEPA process for clearances through the National Environmental Protection Administration. I think we got that right. Policy. It's funny. I know what it's used for and why. I don't necessarily know what NEPA stands for. But it's the process by which any project on public lands, especially, and sometimes on local lands, needs to go through for approval, so that there is no impact on biology specifically. In this case, it was a cactus, and there's also archaeology here.
I remember we had to worry about wetlands when we were doing linear construction, and might have to move a sidewalk around a wetland, for example.
Yeah, definitely. Wetlands and stream crossings can get complicated. Wetlands and stream crossings require working with the Army Corps of Engineers versus just maybe the BLM, the Bureau of Land Management, or the U.S. Forest Service. So when they clear a corridor through NEPA, it's typically 100 feet wide. It's about the average, unless there are known resources out there that are probable, more likely, and they clear a little bit wider corridor so that when they discover something, the trail can be moved without clearing or completely realigning the trail to, say, the other side of the valley. And then in the field, typically our crews decide also where to put the trail. So they're not actually following the bona fide final pin flag or flagging line. If they run into something that's you can't see on the surface, a big root system of a tree that's very desirable to keep, and they really don't like cutting trees. They don't like getting covered in ticks, but they especially don't like cutting trees because trees need to stay. They just go around them. So a lot of I check the grade through GIS. This is a similar analysis using the exact same tool, but it's for a stream corridor. And I can review, in this case, like the cross section across a stream corridor every 100 feet or whatever spacing that I choose. And I can use that information for planning a trail. I can better understand riparian habitat or even flooding, the floodplain itself along the stream. Should a client want a trail that follows a stream, everyone likes to hike along the stream, fishermen especially. So, but yeah, and streams are great to follow. They're just a great natural feature that everyone, especially in the desert, wants to be a part of. Kind of move a little faster here. I do some line of sight analysis. In this case, is the private resort that was being constructed, and they didn't really want trails directly behind or in the line of sight from bungalows, which is these outbuildings that they have here that you can rent. None of us will be able to afford to stay at this hotel, at least unless we win the lottery. But one thing they actually planned for was, I'm going to just say it, hippie showers. They're actually going to have outdoor showers on the back sides of these bungalows, and they definitely did not want trails on the hillside behind those bungalows. So I had to prove that I was not going to design trails that could be seen from those bungalows. And this yellow dot represents these bungalows, or this area right here. So I also use line of sight analysis for trail crossings, trails that cross roadways, so that automobile operators can see the trail users, and vice versa.
Barney, what software is that?
That software is actually I can use QGIS, but Global Mapper does it very, very well as well. ArcGIS, all the GIS applications actually can complete this analysis.
Pretty cool.
Yeah. I create a lot of client visualizations we're using GIS. We can work with not Global Mapper, sorry, Mapbox, and just create map apps or trail map apps for their websites. I also work a little bit with the bike park designs and creating visualizations. I don't know how to build a bike park. I know how they're built, so I know how to design them. I'm not necessarily a bike park user. I also create GIS data and keep it simple or small file sizes so that clients can use it in Google Earth. Not all clients have access or the knowledge using GIS applications. So you can share data with clients and they can open it in Google Earth and visualize it, present it to their investors or user groups and that kind of thing. Another thing I use is a gimbal with my phone, but I can put a camera in as well and create kind of like Google Street View or Trail View, as I call it. It's not. Somebody's probably already got that term, whatever. Maybe not. Maybe I'm using it and they'll come back and try to sue me or something. That's just what I'm calling it. It's photo documentation for the trail that takes a picture, a forward-facing picture along the trail alignment every 10 feet. And I could tell it how often in time but it's easier to tell it how often using GPS technology. And this can be used for design work, but it also can be used for as-built documentation, or just in this case, assessment, conditions assessment. One thing I do always is use the EXIF data that can be attached to photos, or the GPS coordinates for photos. And I drop those photos from assessments or ground proofing missions into GIS so that I can go back and look at these sites later. So by just clicking on the little icon here, I can see a picture of this bridge, small bridge, stream bridge. I think this other picture was actually like underneath the bridge. It's kind of a shot of the buttress. I also do create wayfinding and kiosks for clients. People need to know where they're going, and they need the "You are here" sign every once in a while. It's good to see that information. It's also a great tool to convey other information to recreationists. In this case, there's some watershed information for the, this is actually I just noticed this is a draft. This is not a final because of the still text down here is not in English. I don't think that's in any language, actually. But watershed information for the city of Grand Junction and town of Palisade, in this case, the project being the Palisade Plunge from the top of the Grand Mesa, which is still under construction, down to the town of Palisade. It ends right downtown Palisade, traversing across the top of the Grand Mesa and then dropping off. So the vertical drop is demonstrated or displayed here on this profile, a very simple profile, but the starting elevation being 10,162 and the final elevation 4,728.
That's an insane trail.
That's what?
An insane trail.
Yeah, I think I've seen our crews have been developing this trail for the past year, actually a year and a half. And there are sections that I don't think I would want to be on a bike on, let alone hike. The exposure is super, it's huge exposure. The drops the scenery is great. But, yeah, it's a very complicated, difficult trail, and it's long. And the worst part of it is actually down here in the last few miles. So if you're planning on riding the whole trail, be prepared because you'll be tired at the end. At mile 27, after 27 miles, you're you're going to need to be still fresh in the head for the last few miles there, which is very difficult at the end. So don't quote me on this, but I'm sure there'll be a lot of search and rescue operations. And they have already identified 16 LZs and have them mapped out in their GIS system. Flight for Life can extract and search and rescue can extract users from this trail.
Relative to this trail right there on that previous picture, I see that it's a multi-user trail. So we have hikers, bikers, and horseback riders. Mm-hmm. Is this trail particular being managed like some other trails that I'm seeing, where like certain days are for horseback riders, certain days are for bike riders, certain days are one direction of travel and another direction of travel?
In Western Colorado, we haven't used or ran into that at this time, but if this trail was near a heavily populated area, I think that would be the case.
Right. I see it in.
I know a lot of the trails along the Wasatch Mountains or range outside of Salt Lake City are that way. Odd days or bikes and
Yep.
days or hikers. Runners.
A couple trails in Clear Creek Canyon are set up that way now.
Yeah. I think that's a great management plan.
Mm-hmm. Same.
Real briefly, it's more of the cartography and GIS for using for cartography and actually demonstrating knowledge and presenting trail design information to clients.
David?
Yeah.
Please pardon the interruption. Just a time advisory. We have 5 minutes.
Great.
But I want to also mention that if everyone wants to hang out beyond 9:30 and do Q&A, we can do as much of that as we want.
Yep.
And flex out. So
I'm getting close. I think I'm done.
No.
Actually, I don't know what slide number I'm on anymore. I should put a little number up in the corner. And actually, see, there it is. There's the last slide. I kind of got off topic, or not really off topic, but off track. But the next phase of after trail design, after designing the trail in GIS and checking grades and ensuring there's no conflicts with wildlife corridors, mapped wildlife corridors, or habitat or archaeological sites is to get out on the ground and actually ground proof the trail. In this case, I have the pink polka dot flagging. I have to tell you the truth is with GPS technology now, I don't flag anymore. I just tell clients that if you want to go look at your trail corridors, is to take your GPS out there. It's like, why litter the landscape with flagging? And cows love it. They eat this stuff. It was at Sandstone Ranch in Douglas County, and there was a small herd of cows right behind me as I flagged the trail corridor. Douglas County wanted flagging, and I was like, no, you don't want flagging. And they're like, yes, we do. And the cows just followed right behind me and they ate the flagging. But that's a topic for an entire another presentation.
Might be
field work and actually getting out there, and it'd be a better topic to take into the field and actually go do it with participants. Yep. So, any question?
Yeah, so before I kind of wrap up here, I'm gonna take 30 seconds toward the end here and wrap up, but we'd like to, open the forum up if anyone has an observation, some experience to share, a question, anything like that.
I got a question for you, Barney. Excuse me. You mentioned exposed trails. Aside from very carefully, how do you build exposed trails?
Very carefully. And if the recording stops, I can, even if it doesn't, I can show you on our company's website, on the primarily, the opening page here is this time-lapse video of crews working on the trail, on the Palisade Plunge, and they are on rope. They're using, in some cases, the ropes to move material to the site. They have chipping hammers and generators, which they will rope up on site and cut trail. with chipping hammers. It's slow business, very expensive actually. That was my quick response to that question. In this case, this wall here was originally built by John Otto, who is supposedly the founder of the Colorado National Monument. Actually, he was, not supposedly, and did a lot of the trail work in the Colorado National Monument. But in this case, it's on the Grand Mesa, and he built these walls around the turn of the previous century.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and we've rebuilt them since. There's some other project examples. I guess we do actually work on ski areas for the earlier question, but mainly for tree clearing, and we actually get hired. Some of our guys get hired in the winter to pack snow by hand, or well, by feet, by ski. I think there's probably a term for that. Ryan probably knows it. Manual snow packing.
Yeah, ski cutting or boot packing, all those. Yeah.
And then equestrian. We just wrapped up this sandstone ranch project last year.
Yeah, it just opened a few months ago, and I haven't been there yet.
Yeah.
Lizzie, you went there, didn't you? Someone I know went there and said it was pretty good.
Haven't been to Sandstone yet. Been around to a couple of the other new Mesa areas, but not Sandstone yet.
We've done work in Wyoming, North Carolina, South Carolina. We have a crew in Arkansas, North Carolina. We have a big project coming up in New Mexico this year, but primarily Colorado and Utah, where we started.
Before we wrap up the recording, any other questions, comments? We all love to have those. So if anyone has a thought. All right, cool. I just take a moment, to kind of close and obviously to thank Barney, first of all, thank you for that brilliant discussion. I really enjoyed it. An hour flew by. And I think from this, we can see that such an interesting and diverse set of skills go into building a trail and toward making someone qualified to be a designer and builder. That's something that was really new to me. And how much goes into it, including the community approval, track location, track design, environmental and archaeological concerns, all the use of technology. It's amazing. And like Barney said, a lot of whole new topics, and we would love to explore some of those and possibly go into more detail, more in depth on some of those myriad topics that we touched on today. And I want to mention that everyone who's here, please consider these upcoming topics. We're scheduled for making the outdoors more welcoming, a discussion about the use of technology in the outdoors, and getting started with 14ers is another topic that we're going to explore here in the next several weeks. And the possibility also of adding topics, we welcome that as well. So stay tuned for those. Barney, I thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Barney.
Looking forward to doing it again.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's fascinating.
That was good.
It was great. Thank you.